I'm coming for you, Zerg.
How cool is that? For this gun that he has here, I kind of want to sculpt like a gnarly venom mouth around it with like teeth and stuff and have the gun actually coming out of the mouth. But for that, it would be better if rather than holding the gun, if it was actually an extension of his arm. So I'm assuming inside there's just a couple of wires that I'll be able to sever and then reattach in an orientation that works better for me. So I'm going to try and cut off this gun and then just move it down so it's coming out of his arm instead and not get rid of that hand altogether.
We've got to blast our way out of here.
I was hoping that this would be hollow, but it's not. At least right here, it's solid. So that's gonna be a little trickier than I expected, but I think I can manage. Jesus Christ, I finally got a piece off, only to find it to be completely solid on the inside too. There's really no way I'm going to be able to get in here without completely shredding these wires. My plan of keeping the laser beam intact is not going to work. That's okay, it's fine, it's fine. The next thing is I need to cut off his dome and work on that separately, because if I do a bunch of sculpting, well, I wouldn't even be able to do a bunch of sculpting on the inside because his dumb head is in the way. But even if I could, I wouldn't be able to paint it. So I gotta cut that off and I'll be reattaching it later. To sculpt the inside of the dome mouth, I intend to use some epoxy sculpt, but I quickly realized that it didn't really want to stick to the smooth surface of this clear acrylic dome, so I busted out a sharp blade and roughed it up a bit. This worked really well. Now, I don't know how anatomically correct this is, but to suggest the upper palate of the mouth, I used a bunch of thin clay tubes and I just laid them out in a mouthy looking way. You know what I'm saying? I used a big fat chunk of clay to make some gums, and I have a glass of teeth here that I already previously made, and these are already hardened, so I can easily just press them in one by one. Adding a second row made them look really gnarly. Oh, and I added a uvula too. In retrospect, it's way too thick, but who am I to judge another man's uvula? Just a quick editor's note, I ended up really just not caring for the way that this looked. It's way too chunky, so I decided to make a second one out of one of those like empty Christmas ornaments, and you can't buy those just one at a time, so I have a bunch of them. So I decided it might be fun to try and make the helmet interface with just a clear one so that I can still cover his face. For the outside, I wanted a Venom face, so I cut some eye shapes out of some more of that stiff paper. I covered the dome with as thin a layer of clay as I possibly could, and then I just pushed the eyes into it, and then around that I just sculpted some detail as best I can. For the mouth that's gonna go over his gun, I want to have it open a little bit, have a little bit of separation between the mouth itself and the gun, and I think the best way to do that is that I'm gonna sculpt the top jaw and the bottom jaw separately and then glue them on and incorporate them better after the fact. Now to do this, I first made a template / skeleton out of some stiff paper. Next, I squished down some clay inside of it, and I added some more of the teeth from my trusty teeth cup. Also added a little tongue. I mean, how could I not? For the inside of the helmet, I drew some infected veins on Buzz's face using a Gundam pen, and then I just sculpted some generic nastiness around it. I painted all the fleshy bits with a gory red, and then I picked out all the teeth with some bone white. I used an Agrax Earthshade to dirty those teeth up, and then I washed the red parts with like a crimson wash. Now this was truly an experiment, but I decided to try painting over all the nasty fleshy parts with a clear nail polish to just really make it super glossy. You know, it actually ended up eating up the paint, but like just a little bit and only in a few select spots. So I'm not really sure what's up with that. It's a little bit late for this, but what if I had made it so it could like slide over? Wouldn't that be crazy? I glued on the arm jaws, and now it's pretty much the same deal as before. So I cut some eyes out of paper, I pushed them in, and then I sculpted some detail around that. With my texture lines here, I'm trying to establish kind of a twisting motion so that it looks more like an action pose, you know what I mean? Here you can see that demonstrated a little bit further as I'm starting to construct lower jaw's anatomy out of basically tendons that twist around following that path. I will say in hindsight, I wish that I had taken a Dremel material to the arm and filed it down before I started sculpting on it, because that way I wouldn't be bulking it out as much, because right now it's looking a little bit stumpy, but I mean, it is what it is. The other thing to think about is that epoxy sculpt is basically a rock, right? So right now, this guy's arm is extremely heavy and he's completely lost the ability to stand on his own. I wanted the other hand to be a cool Venom hand rather than a dorky Buzz Lightyear hand. I thought that I could pull off the original hand using my amazing strength, but that didn't end up working out. I just gave it a snip. I decided to try sculpting a monster hand out of green stuff, and I mean, it was real floppy, so I tried to like position it around a paper ball to kind of hold the shape while it dries, but I realized that what I really needed to do is to stop being not that smart and make an armature out of some wire. And then on top of that, I can work in layers. So first I added some fingers, stop, let it cure. And then I bulked out the palm, stop, step back, let it cure. And then on top of that, I added my details. Letting it cure in between steps is basically like hitting the save button. I want to keep this arm relatively clean to contrast with the gross monster arm on the other side, but I did still want to goth it up a little bit, so I added on a shoulder bell that I harvested from an Omegamon figure. Hey, make sure that you are subscribed if you want to see what that's all about. And then just to make everything a little bit more cohesive, I covered the entire figure in veins. Venom is usually pictured with veins, but to me, I mean, this doesn't really make a lot of sense because like the dude is made of goo, right? So does he have blood? If this is addressed in one of the Venom movies, I wouldn't know about it because I haven't seen those. I have seen the trailers and they made me cringe so hard that it dislocated my jaw, and I can still hear it click to this day. I designed a symbol that's halfway in between the Star Command logo and the Venom spider. I wanted to cut this out of my stupid vinyl cutter that I hate, but I mean, it really didn't do shit, which is why I keep saying that it's stupid. And I hate it. If I shine a really bright light on it from an extreme angle, I can almost see the tiny little scratches that the machine left behind. So doing that, I was able to trace around with a pen and cut them out that way. I did cut this out in several layers so that I could make a cool 3D effect. Wow. I wanted to make some cool posable tentacles. I took some aluminum wire and I chucked it up in a drill and I spun it around, and that just makes it a little bit stronger. It also gives it some more texture for the glue to adhere to. So then I just covered that in like a super thin layer of black hot glue. You heard me. I'm out here using black hot glue. You've literally never even heard of that. When I'm starting to get happy with the look, I can plunge it into a bucket of water and that's gonna cure the hot glue real quick and keep it from running anymore. This is actually pretty similar to how I make magic wands. So if you guys want to learn more about that, let me know. I drilled some holes onto Buzz's back and I really wanted to avoid the Dr. Octopus look here. So I made sure that I had an odd number of tentacles and that they were not evenly spaced out. Then I used more of that black hot glue to glue them all in place. I can't really dip them into water anymore, but I'm still impatient. So instead I froze them in place with an upside down can of compressed air. It's basically like an ice blast attack. This might actually be pretty dangerous. I should point out that I don't consider any of my stuff to be a tutorial. I don't recommend that you copy me. And as a matter of fact, I don't even remember giving you permission to watch this video. I painted over all the parts that still needed it with just some basic black craft paint, and then I dry brushed over that with some purple. I'm switching to mini paint now because mini paint is more pigmented than craft paint, and I'm painting over black, so I need that coverage, boy. And since one of his feet is showing, you know I had to do it to him. It was a bit of a risk, but I went over all the white parts with a purple wash. Now I don't hate the look, but I will say that I did course correct later on with some more neutral colors. As the final touch, I used some woohoo glue to make some slobber. Actually, let me throw some resin in there too. Why the hell not? I didn't necessarily want to give him a base, but like I said, the dude can't stand on his own. I'm going quick and dirty with some foam, okay? I pushed Buzz into it to make some impressions in the foam, and then I used that as a guide to just cut/rip out some random shapes around it. Then I just made a bunch of cuts in the edges to represent like striations. I just start ripping out material and also kind of gouging at the edges with my fingernails. How come every time you cut your nails, you always need them later that day? To get more of a rocky texture, I just start friggin' bashing it with an actual rock. And then I just glued some sand on top because I had some left over from my Squid Game diorama. And I thought that using some here would give me a good excuse to cross-promote another video. And I did not want to make this a gray rock because Buzz himself is already mostly monochromatic, but also skewing more towards the cool side of the scale. So I wanted to make it brown to bring in some warm colors. It's gonna look like poop for a while, but we have to just push through it.
Phrasing?
And since I do have Citadel washes in several colors, I decided to just kind of splotch watch them on randomly to add some variation. Are these Citadel pots designed to be knocked over? Because I feel like I spill one every time I use them, and I don't think I'm the only one. Fuck them pots. I glued on some grass tufts, and then I will say that I also teabagged it off camera. Oh, you probably already know this, but that just means I ripped open a tea bag and I just glued that on to make like a ground texture. Well, if it has another meaning, that's something that I'm just not aware of. And the last thing I had to do was just drizzle on some more of that hot, steamy glue.
That's some hot glue.
I also dry brushed some of that tan color onto Buzz's feet to make him fit more into the environment, and we done.